Built with noble intentions, but marred by the tales of overcrowding and outdated medical practices, this massive Gothic behemoth serves as both an architectural marvel and the haunting reminder of America's complex history with mental health care. Originally intended as a sanctuary, offering the cutting-edge treatment of its day, the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum became a symbol of the inadequacies and ethical challenges tied to mental health treatment in the 19th and 20th century. We're pulling back the curtains to expose the lives of those who walked its walls, doctors, patients, and perhaps even a ghost or two. So embrace yourself as we step through the iron gates and traverse the eerie corridors of the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Here With Us, and today we have a very special episode as I am joined by my sister-in-law, Erin Cowan.
Hi, thank you for having me.
It's great to have you. And today on this episode, we will be discussing the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. As always, we will start with the history, the hauntings, and then we're just going to tear this thing apart. Just as an FYI to you guys, I won't be looking at the camera a whole lot because I'm obviously sitting across from her. So if you have a problem with me not making eye contact, then this isn't your episode, and I apologize. And if you're listening, then you really don't have to worry about it. Before we go into the asylum itself, we first have to mention Dorothea Dixon, who in the early 19th century was an advocate for mental institutions after visiting a prison and seeing how many mentally ill people were just prisoners amongst common criminals. You want to start with history?
Yeah, so it looks like Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, also known as Western State Asylum, was built in a Kirkbride style. So Thomas Kirkbride, he believed that psychiatric hospitals should be secluded from cities and built on a linear floor plan. So it's kind of like built like there's the main, and then there's just wings that are just built off of it. And so they just thought that open air would just help with bringing them like just sanity and just have, it's basically how like the tuberculosis, they were very big on just having them just open air style, keeping it together. They were very, it wasn't meant to be as large as it was. They were only supposed to house 250 patients. But over time, by the 1880s, they ended up having 717 patients. By the 1938, they had 1,661 patients. And then in 1948-9, they had 1,800 patients. Lastly, the last known number that they had that we had found was by the 1950s, they had 2,600 patients. That is more than twice the size that they should have housed.
Yeah, and so it has a crazy history. So it was actually commissioned to be built in 1858, which was right before the Civil War. Before the Civil War broke out, they had only finished the main basement and one of the wings. However, the 7th Ohio Infantry Regiment actually went and captured the grounds because of some money that was given to the city to build it. However, West Virginia seceded from the South and became part of the Union, so they sent the infantry unit there to get the gold, which was like the sum of like $26,000 in today's money, to make sure that the rebels didn't get their hands on it. And then it was continued to be built until 1881. So during the Civil War, it was actually used as barracks, and there was a horse barn that was built there. Stables were built there for the horses, and they actually kept it for a long time, and there was many battles actually fought there on the grounds of the hospital. The actual main asylum was finished in 1881. I know you did some research on the style of it.
Yeah. So the Kirkbride style, like I said, it's just like mainly like they just had wings.
Yeah.
And so they made sure that it was secluded just away from main cities, that because obviously they didn't want to advertise that they were a lunatic asylum. They were housing the mentally ill. They wanted to keep it away. That way people back then, they could just live their lives, because they just would send people, whether you were, women going through hysteria back then, which now we know is not a real thing.
I don't know about that, but
hey, come on now. Women go through hysteria. They had, women going through their periods. They didn't think that was a thing. They were like, oh gosh, let's just send.
Loss of appetite.
Yeah, exactly.
Mourning for their child that died in the war.
Exactly. A lot of it was women, and they really didn't realize that mental illness was a highly intact thing. It was just kind of like, oh, everybody's just insane. Let's just send them somewhere else.
Yeah, I read that basically any adult woman could be placed there by a male for any reason. If the male died before she was released, she would have to stay there or permanently. So it was a very cruel and unusual place. But what I think is kind of funny about the Kirkbride style is it's a Gothic and Tudor revival architecture, which harkens back to Mansfield Reformatory, because Levi Schofield also believed that the building would inspire, and Kirkbride is quoted in saying that the building should inspire change. So they literally believe that this big, huge, honking limestone building would inspire people to not be insane anymore. And it is also the largest hand-cut stone building in North America.
Yeah, he was the leading doctor in asylum medicine, and he was actually the lead on design of the asylums, which was absolutely insane. To also to be a doctor and also be an architect of some sort.
What was I know you found something pretty interesting on some techniques that he picked up that were first used at the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum.
Oh, like the lobotomy?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was actually the first known like experimental lobotomy. So they just had like a big, what they call auditoriums, or what else are they called? Look at that. They would have auditoriums or just
Like the big
stages.
the big tiled
Yeah.
ones that had like all the doctors sitting around the
Yeah.
top looking down
like
in.
a gallery of some sort, and they would just perform these just as experiments. A lot of patients that went through them, it scrambled their brains. It made them like pretty much vegetables of some sort. They would be some people would retract to lower mental stages of age. So me, let's just say I went in there, I was 28, I could have reverted back to mainly 2 years old. It had been insane. Some were performed well, some were performed horribly.
And for those of you that don't know, the lobotomy that she's referring to specifically that they started using there is called the ice pick lobotomy. They literally would take an ice pick and place it in the corner of your eye and try to, by sheer pressure, press into your frontal cortex. So it was a very, very, very...
And most of the time, the patients were awake.
Yeah.
They're at that point, they really didn't understand anesthetics.
Yeah, it was just inhumane, like, treatment. You also had somebody famous that was a patient there.
So we all know John F. Kennedy. He was our president at one point in time. Sadly, tragically died. His sister, Rosemary Kennedy, she was set there by her father just because things weren't going well for her. So he was like, you know what? She's going to go get a lobotomy. That's it. So they did the lobotomy. It actually failed. And she was there from the time she went in and till her passing, and she was there for over 20 or 40 years, between 20 and 40 years, I believe. And nobody came to visit her in that time.
Some dark secrets of the Kennedys right there.
Yeah, none of the family members. It wasn't released until 1980s that she had a failed lobotomy.
Oh my God.
She reverted back to 2 years old in mental age, as for what they say anyway. But also the grounds themselves, they were meant to be self-sufficient, apparently. They had water plants, they had water filtration, waste systems, they had a dairy barn, canneries, gardens, livestock. They would raise cows and pigs and stuff for the grounds.
So if we've learned anything this season of Here With Us, in the 19th and 20th century, if you wanted to treat people super inhumanely, all you needed to do was take them out somewhere where you had access to water and cows, because it's kind of the same story of the Mansfield Reformatory. You talked about earlier about how the patient numbers grew so rapidly. I saw that the cows were malnourished from producing so much milk for the inmate, or for the people they had in the hospital.
They just couldn't keep up with the amount of people that they had. Same with staffing. I mean, the nursing staffing and the doctor staffing was just rapidly declining because they were just trying to. You had some nurses that were great and they wanted to really care for their patients, and you had some that were just there to get a paycheck. It was just really hard to keep that flow going. Especially in such a hard, mentally challenging place. It was just very difficult to keep that staffing up, especially when, people are just consistently dropping off, children and, adults just trying to make their way through, depending on their mental status, and or There was a huge list of stuff that they could have had that just randomly just sent them there. To name a few, like they had incompetence, kicked in the head by a horse. Asthma was one, insane.
Oh, dang.
Yeah, any domestic affliction, domestic trouble, the war. I mean, the Civil War, like you spoke on. I mean, that PTSD wasn't even established in, but that was a big thing. That's a mental illness. I mean, that's something that people go through today. Grief. So, passing and they haven't gotten over it in a certain amount of time. They would just say, oh, they need to go. A lot of it was female geared, based upon like before they really knew like the woman's anatomy. They really just like, oh, push them on. They're just
The
crazy.
first 9 patients were all female.
Yeah, well.
So, being the guest, I'm going to let you have the honors of discussing the haunting.
Oh, absolutely. So I would like to start with the fact that the grounds themselves were built on 666 acres.
I saw that too. I thought it was made up at first, and I like double and triple checked it. That's so weird.
I had to go through so many different research items to make sure that was absolutely correct.
Because that's just creepy as all hell.
Just the similarities, especially like knowing like this the dark, dank history that could have happened and did happen there.
Yeah.
It's just insane, the similarities. And like also like the grounds that they were built on, it could have been anything.
Wasn't the only major like upgrade to the actual like cemetery itself?
Yeah, actually the only expansion that was ever built was just a graveyard. They never expanded the hospitals or the asylum itself. They never expanded any rooms. Patients were stuck, 4 to 5 to a room of basically a 6x6. There was no room for anything. And they were lined down the hallways.
Yeah, and this went on all the way till 1994, so less than 30 years ago.
You were already born, and I was yet to be born. I was a year before me. It was still active as you were a toddler.
It's crazy.
To me, that's just insane. I would like to start off talking about a little light. Let's be light with it. Nurse Elizabeth. She's not much known about her, but she's very present in the hospital itself. She's just known to kind of creep around room to room, wing to wing. She was apparently one of the very helpful nurses that really wanted to make sure her patients were getting cared for.
Right.
So they just see her. She would drifting by here and there, just running through.
Is there any area she's known to like haunt more? Or?
They just said mainly the first and second wing. Just
does
kind
she
of
do any
kind
kind of like specific things?
No, they just said that she just kind of just floats from room to room, and she's just a present. Like she's not really heard. She's just a presence.
Okay.
So there's videos that I found and photos that I found of her on there. But you were speaking on the Civil War. There's also Ruth and also the Civil War soldiers. Ruth, now she's a little crazy.
Okay.
She was in the Civil War wing as well. She was during the Civil War era. So again, not much is really known about her because a lot of documentation wasn't taken back then, especially during the war. But she is a known man-hater. Really? And she is known to just throw objects or, push men. She just doesn't like people. Like, if you're a woman, I'm not really sure if she does anything. They really haven't documented nobody's really documented on that. But a lot of men feel her presence, and
where's she specifically at?
Civil War wing.
Okay, which is I think the East Wing.
East Wing, yeah. So, and obviously we know the Civil War soldiers, they just tend to walk around here and there. Yeah. Be around through. Then we also have, I have James. Poor guy.
What happened to James? What's the deal with James?
He was a simple man. He was just a simple heart. He just lived his life in the asylum. I mean, they really didn't say what was, his issues because, again, probably poor documentation. But they have his death on record. He had a heart attack in the bathtub.
Oh my gosh.
He's known to be walking around the grounds and just hanging out.
Does like he know he's dead, or does he think?
I believe people have tried to help him, let him know that he's dead, but he just hangs out in the upper. I believe they said the upper bathrooms, probably the second or third floor. So he just likes to hang out over there. Okay. So next we have the back room. I'm pretty sure everybody should probably know this story. Poor story about Dean.
Oh yeah, I know this one very well.
Big Jim and David Mason. Big Jim and David Mason, they were just known known hateful people in there. They would harass people throughout the building.
Yeah.
They really just didn't have a care in the world. Well, poor Dean one day in the wing one of the last rooms, he was just doing his thing. Big Jim and David came in there. They tried to hang him. They just they tried over the door frame. I believe they have windows through them, so they just tried to hang him with his bed sheet, and he didn't die. So they were like, you know what? We're gonna do it. So they stuck him under the bed, put his head under the bed, and they just jumped on the bed until they touched the ground.
Yeah, he was mute too, from what I read. Like, so he didn't really talk or like couldn't scream for help. And I think they had like strung him up, and like he'd lost consciousness, and they weren't sure if he was dead, and they just wanted to make sure by jumping on the bed until like they hit the ground. But I heard that room that I've seen a lot of stuff that says in that room that you can have toys back there and help play with them, or you'll hear the bed jumping, like the squeaking of the bed on the ground.
You'll still hear softly crying.
Yeah.
Just soft crying. Now, it's not known if it's him per se, but they are associating that with it being in that wing, that is him.
What can you tell us about the children's spirits?
There's said to be several spirits of children there, just due to them being born and raised actually in the asylum themselves. If a woman was pregnant, they would oftentimes give birth in the asylum, and then due to the operation that Trans-Allegheny had, they would allow them to raise this child in the facility. So, like, they would get a room with this child, and remind you, they would probably be sharing this room with 4 other people. So they would have 5 people in a room. So it's just the way that things were done were just not well. I'm glad that there's rules and standards in place at this point. There's just a lot of stuff that happened. But the most famous one that they have right now, her name is Lily. She is a spirit of a child, they say. All she likes to do is just laugh and play. If you bring in toys or balls or, baby dolls, she just wants to play with them. And now it's not known if it's an actual child. I mean, you can connect it to other things, but I like to believe that children, unfortunately, probably did pass in there due to either just maybe poor neglect, malnutrition, like we've discussed. I mean, the standards were not great. Standards were not well there. So it just depends on everything. But she is known to just be around, just hang around the hospital itself. Like, there's really no pinpoint place for her. Probably in one of the, I believe it's wing one, I believe. So she's around there a lot. So I just think it's just a whole mess of just neglect, and just people are just so full of hatred and rage that they just cannot leave it. It's just, there's just so much that went on there. The spirits are just attached.
Well, and it being made of limestone in particular, I believe that has something to do with what harnesses the energy and keeps it there. It being on a ley line, but the hand cut limestone buildings, like just like Mansfield Reformatory, they're batteries for paranormal energy. You were just saying what the asylum inspired, which I find to be really cool. So
yeah, I mean, there's plenty of asylums that were an inspiration for it, but it is believed that this is one of the main inspirations for it. It was actually inspired for American Horror Story Asylum. I mean, they did touch on the abuse, the neglect that people probably went through. They touched on a lot of the overcrowding. So one of the very very last, scenes that you see in Asylum is the overcrowding and the poor state that the asylum had itself. So, I mean, it was a big inspiration for that. And I'm pretty sure there was an inspiration for a lot of other, One Who Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yeah.
That was an inspiration there too.
Have you seen any videos on the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum other than the research you did?
I
Have you seen
mean,
like the Ghost Adventures episode there?
yeah, I have.
Have you seen what was Jack Osborne's show called where they went there?
Yeah, I saw clips of it. I don't think I've ever watched that
So
one in full
they
entirely.
made contact with Lily, and they believe that to actually be a demon.
And that's what I was kind of alluding to earlier. I didn't think we would touch base on demon stuff, but I believe personally
Whatever's
for
going on there,
myself,
we can talk about there.
yeah,
That's
personally for myself, like I don't trust any child spirit. I just think that's a darker entity of any sort because children, like I feel like demons and darker spirits, they can just see that kind of stuff, and they're like, oh, we can probably sweet talk with these adults, or we can kind of get in their mind that we are hanging out with a child and we can, potentially possess. I don't trust any child spirit no matter what. It's just there's just too much possibility for me.
So do you think that there are more than one maybe demonic spirit there, or do you think that it's a lot of just sorrow and torment from humans that are kind of like left behind, like repeating itself?
I feel like I feel like it's a mixture of both. There's really no pinpoint. It's just to me, based on what I've researched and what I know, I feel like darker spirits and demons are born of just hatred and, just downright like sorrow.
Yeah.
Like I think that's what it festers and like they just can't move on, which creates those darker spirits. That's just what I believe and how I've researched things. So I feel like a lot of it's born from.
Yeah, it's this place is definitely on my list to go check out just because it has so much activity that it could be demonic, it could be ghost related, it could be, there's just so much that it could be. And I think that every time somebody goes there that there's less questions answered and more questions become more questions are asked. So
I just feel like, there should be more recognition for the mentally ill. I'm glad that we have overcome, just creating some sort of asylum,
a prison.
just essentially a prison in a sense, because the way that everything was laid out, thought process, great. And then the actual process of doing it, the go live of it, horrible. Actually horrible.
It's like the real life legit version of Arkham Asylum.
Absolutely. It's just
Batman is gonna be showing up there, ghost busting motherfuckers.
Oh God, Joker just be hanging out. I just feel like there just should be just more recognition into mental health.
Yeah, and I feel like it's one that people, like, when you say it, like, they think you're, like, Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, and it's, like, they're thinking it's somewhere far off in Europe, and it's like, dude, it's in West Virginia. It's
right in our backyard, man.
Yeah, it's, like, right here. So what do you think? Legit?
Legit haunting, for sure.
I'm going to side with you on the legitness of it.
I mean, there's a few places I could feel of, maybe no, but this one for sure for me. I would probably be shaking on my boots if I was there.
It's for sure for me, too, so... All right, well, that covers it for this episode of Here With Us. As always, I'm Cliff Shanholter, and thank you for joining us, and thank you, Aaron, for being a guest today. As always, if you're not already, please like and subscribe and turn on notifications, or follow us on your favorite podcasting platforms. Until next time, thank you for being here with us.